A group of 15 influential civil society organizations in Liberia have tabled a bill in Parliament that they say is ready to be used to establish a tribunal to try crimes committed during more than 20 years of civil war and unrest. The recommendations made in 2009 by a special commission for the establishment of such a court have still not been adopted by the Liberian government. Under the presidency of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, as well as under that of George Weah since 2018, Liberia has not instituted a special tribunal to look into war crimes that were committed during the civil wars of 1989 to 2003 that claimed around 250,000 lives. Despite pressure from civil society, Liberia has yet to hold a trial on this period marked by a litany of abuses attributable to all parties, massacres of civilians, torture, rape, enlistment of child soldiers. The civil wars brought the country, one of the poorest in the world, to its knees, and a decade later was ravaged by the Ebola epidemic. A number of personalities directly involved or implicated still hold prominent positions in politics and in the economy. President Weah has been reluctant to establish the special court. Meanwhile, a Swiss court last week sentenced a former rebel commander, Aliou Kosaya, to 20 years in prison after he was convicted of multiple atrocities during Liberia's civil wars to 20 years in prison. He is the first Liberian convicted of war crimes in his country. Well, for some analysis now, we're now joined by international law expert Dr. Innocent Badasu, who's in Accra. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. Perhaps we can start by just maybe let's reflect on the nature of the crimes that were committed during these civil wars.
Yeah, thank you. When you talk about the nature of crimes, basically, we have to go back to what exactly was contained in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's reports. And in that report, they came to the conclusion that one, crimes against humanity were committed, and then also war crimes were equally committed. And these crimes were committed by all parties to the conflict at the time. Now, what then that means in practical terms? We have a situation where sexual violence was adopted, enlistment of children into various armed groups, what we call enlistment of child soldiers. That is also a crime under international humanitarian law. Then apart from that, we can also indicate murder. Murder cases have been recorded. And so these are some of the crimes that have been committed. And then when you look at the nature of the crime, they also put it on two main levels. The first level would be those specific crimes that constitute international crimes. Then those specific crimes that could be described as violations of domestic law. And so if you take, for instance, stealing, robbery, and all other everyday crimes in a given country, those ones would largely be within the context of the domestic law to deal with those crimes. So we have two types of crimes if you're looking at the nature, those that are purely domestic in nature and those that borders on international crimes.
So a commission recommended this tribunal as far back as 2009. Why do you think that it's taken so long to try and get it off the ground? Has it been reluctance or just tardiness?
Yeah, we have to recognize that several factors are intervening to, as it were, delay the implementation of the reports. Partly, we can also revisit the politically charged environment within which the recommendations were made by the commission. Now, 2009, you rightly indicated this report came out. But then you and I also would have to avert our minds to the fact that by 2011, about 2 years down the line, these recommendations contained in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's reports were contested, legally contested at the Liberian Supreme Court. And part of those recommendations were struck out, and the Supreme Court held that some of the provisions contained in the Commission's work were unconstitutional, illegal. To that extent, they were of no legal effect. What this means is that it created further legal difficulty or complexities around the implementation of the report. And so this is one legal dimension that we can identify as part of the bigger problem affecting the implementation of the report. The second, we can also move away from the legal challenges and look at the political nature of the recommendations themselves. They create a huge challenge. For instance, banning of some high-profile individuals from taking public offices. That has been contested, and we know some of the names that were listed. Some have come and gone as presidents or heads of states. Possibly some are still in government, either directly holding public positions as an appointed officers or elected officers. So these are varied factors shaping the slow progress towards the implementation of the reports.
All right. Now, the Liberian Senate warned President Weah against reopening old wounds, as they put it, and recommended instead that the president establish a transitional justice commission that will analyze the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Is this the best way forward?
It may not be the best way forward, but under the complex political circumstances that you have, you would need to go for an option that probably would be comprehensive, that would aim to ensure there is fairness and justice. Why the need to revisit all of this is also because some of the recommendations that have been made today can be seriously questioned on the basis of evidence. And so there is a need to go back to evaluate the reports of the commission to see whether some new perspectives have come up, some new issues have emerged since Liberia has had some kind of a stable transition from Madam Sirleaf Johnson now to President Weah, and then going forward, we are seeing a peaceful transfer of power in Liberia. So you need to now reevaluate the kind of political context in which you are, and then also see whether implementing the recommendations in the Commission's work is the way to go, or some new thinking may be available for Liberia to be able to deal with this past injustice. Now, it is also important to note that the hesitation on the part of the Liberian Parliament is also largely driven by voter preferences in specific constituencies, or if you like, constituents. And so when you open up for the establishment of these criminal tribunal to punish persons who were involved in committing the atrocities, it may touch the hearts of electing back some of these senators. And so it is not surprising that they are very careful how they get around it. The next point to raise in relation to this recommendation is possibly to argue that the Senate's recommendation to the president not to open old wounds would be to look for a more reconciliation process, which was also contained in the Commission's work, the National Palava Hearts Forum. And the idea is to look out for traditional dispute resolution mechanisms to deal with the past injustices that occurred throughout the period of the Civil War. And so the recommendation for Senate, from the Senate, is not entirely out of place. But then it also tells us the very complex nature of the situation that we have at hand.
So we're suggesting that the prospects of this bill tabled by these 15 influential civil society organizations actually gaining traction is unlikely.
We have seen some very, very powerful civil society organizations being part of this coalition. One of them to just name we are talking about the Liberian Bar Association. That's very, very significant. And it's important that all stakeholders may have to come together and find a common ground to proceed. There are those who believe that going purely for prosecutions may not be the answer, because if you look at the object and purpose of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's work, the idea is that at the end of the day, you must ensure national unity, you must promote social cohesion, and then also you must ensure national reconciliation amongst the people of Liberia, both home and abroad. Now, the prosecution would be a partial response to the crisis that is at hand at the moment, because it is important that past injustices are dealt with in a fair manner. And in that case, it's important that we do not allow persons who have committed crimes to go unpunished. And so it's going to be quite difficult. The pressure from civil society is significant. But it's at the end of the day, it is the Parliament of Liberia that must make that all-important decision. And it looks like it would be extremely difficult given the context we are in at the moment.
Alio Kosaya was found guilty recently of war crimes in a Swiss court. He's the first Liberian to be convicted over the country's civil war. And I wonder what message you think that this conviction sends to the families of the 250,000 people who lost their lives during the civil unrest.
Right. Largely, the conviction would certainly send a strong signal to those who probably committed all manner of atrocities, and they have decided to, as it were, leave Liberia and find a greener pasture in Europe or in North America. And so the Swiss court trying this individual under universal jurisdiction, it's also giving an indication that in the absence of the establishment of the criminal tribunal in Liberia, other avenues are available for individuals to be able to pursue justice, and also to hold to account those who have been responsible for the commission of these crimes that we have talked about. The second thing we also have to look out for is that it would begin to instigate other prosecutions. So individuals will begin to make complaints and file petitions in European foreign domestic courts to be able to hold individuals accountable for as long as they can invoke the universal jurisdiction principle of these foreign domestic courts.
And I suppose at the end of the day, 250,000 people died. And they had families, and they had friends, they had people who loved them. And in the end, this thing can't just be washed away, wished away. Some kind of justice will have to be delivered.
Absolutely, some kind of justice will have to be delivered. And justice to the victims, and also justice to those who sort of may not be direct victims, but for instance, those who lost their parents and when they were young and they have nobody to take care of them, they've become dissolute, destitute, moving on the streets of Monrovia and elsewhere in Liberia. So you have a huge demand for justice, and this must not be compromised in any way, because when you compromise in punishing those who have committed these kinds of crimes, what you do is that you then encourage it in the future. So the demand for justice must continue. We need to mount pressure for some amount of justice to be delivered, like you have indicated. But that must be done with the overall aim of ensuring social cohesion, national reconciliation, at the end of the day, ensuring that there is political equality in Liberia, there is social equality in Liberia, and then also there is economic opportunity for all, and not necessarily the most powerful and the connected elites.
Dr. Badasu, always great talking to you. Your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks so much indeed for your time.